screen's not been working for some reason. So if you need to see, you can move over to this side. I know it's going to be tough though. Well, that's true. That's true. Either if you can't see it anyways, then I guess it's the same for you. All right. So chapter 3, right, was captivity, right? I'm sorry. Yeah, it was the establishment of Israel. Captivity comes next. Okay, that's chapter 5. I did, yeah. But we talked about the establishment of Israel, right? We're using that book, the Bible and World History, by I think it's Stephen Lesson or something like that. That's what I've been using, right, for this class. So, anyways, we talked about Israel conquering, the Hebrews conquering Canaan. We talked about what was going on, right, during this time too. We talked about Egypt, right? Hey, babe. She's back there walking. She's staring at me like I'm. Never mind. Yeah, I am for some reason. I don't know what I did. Mycenae, which is a Greek city-state, right, is going down. A lot of other places are going downhill, right? But we're also seeing places like India, like, rise up too, okay? Especially in the Indus River Valley. But now we're going to talk about the impacts, how we're going to see a bunch of history come together, right? How they impact each other and how they intersect, right? This is about 1000 to 750 BC. Okay, last time was only 2, but it was really easy for Mike over there. Yeah. This one's 5. So number 1 is, why is King David so revered among both Jews and Christians? Oh, look, guys, remember that one's not working for some reason. So. Jews and Christians. Why is King David so revered among both Jews and Christians?
Now you're talking about later in time.
Yes. Correct, yeah. Number 2. Yes, go ahead.
Are you asking us now or after class?
No, this will be asked later today. But I'm just going through these 5 questions that we're going to be answering throughout the lesson. Number 2 is, what are some of the things that we can learn about the worldview of the people of China during this period? Okay. Number 3, how did the mandate of heaven in China historically affect moral reform within the Chinese systems of government, culture, and philosophy? And number 4, how would you compare your worldview with the one that existed in China during the time of David? And last question here, how did King Solomon violate God's guidelines for him found in 1 Kings 11, 1 through 5? And what do these guidelines teach you about the nature of humankind and our need for a Savior? Okay? But first, I got a question. What makes history great? Me? Well, I hope there's way better answer than that. What makes history great? I've had a lot of you tell me, this is a good class, I like it, I love history. Okay, tell me why it's so great. Yes, Michael.
It's actually a somewhat reassuring topic to see, like, when times seem really, really crazy, to know that it's happened like that before, and you can know how it played out each time. And like, there's that saying that history doesn't repeat, it rhymes.
Right.
So you can always it kind of gives you that foresight of like how things actually play out.
I like that, yeah. History can be very reassuring. Yes, Ron.
History's kind of like falling down the stairs. You're glad when it's over.
That's true, yeah. It's kind of like falling down the stairs, you're glad when it's over. Right. All right. Anybody else? What makes history great?
I think that, and how do I want to put this? What makes history great for us is the recording of it in the Old
Yeah, right. We learn about what's to come, right, from the Old Testament. One more? Go ahead, Michael.
Literally, the Bible is our history. I mean, like, the things that happened in the Bible, that are recorded in the Bible, happened at least 2,000 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
but they are very much a real part of our life today. And
Right.
really, like, we're not living in biblical times. They're not like prophets running around, like, writing down the words of God actively.
Right.
Or, and things that, like, everything that will still come to pass has already been written down at this point.
Yeah.
And it's like, our connection to this is almost literally a study of history.
Yeah, you're right. So I read this headline or something from somewhere. It said, the Bible is not the only authority. And I was like, I didn't even bother reading the article. I just read the headline. And I just went straight to the comments, right? Because I actually learned what this was about. Because it's probably a pretty biased, op-ed type of thing. But I remember one of the comments said, it is not the only authority, but it is the final authority. I was like, ooh, that's good. That's really good. All right, so what makes history? Oh, by the way, I read this yesterday. There is an archbishop, part of the Church of England. He said that, did you read this?
Yeah.
You read that too? He said that the beginning of the Lord's Prayer is problematic. Just those two words, our Father. Because he said, he's saying because it brings up bad experiences for people who've had a bad father, earthly father, or a bad or no father at all. It's like, give me a break, right? It was the most ridiculous thing I've ever read from an archbishop, right? Part of the church. Yes, go ahead.
In that, I listened watching on TV a bit yesterday before we brought it out. But one of the things they say about there were other archbishops, they had a special meeting, and they refuted what he said.
Good.
And their argument, the archbishop was speaking about, he was saying because God is, their argument was because God is spirit, so either male or female, he is spirit, and you worship the spirit, so this was their argument. But the other archbishop and the conservative rejected everything he said.
Well, good, yeah.
So that was a spirit.
Right, yeah. And yeah, I mean, there's obviously 3 in 1, right? The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And it mentions tons of times, like, because they're like, God is gender fluid, blah, 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 blah. No, it says he. He.
I was on to say one thing.
Yeah.
The argument they put forth, the good side was, all authority was in Jesus, and he was the one that put the Lord's Prayer out. So
Right.
he told the archbishop, you say this, you say, Jesus doesn't know what he's saying, or he's a liar.
Right. Good. Yeah, and Jesus is never lying, was never a liar. Yes?
There are nuts everywhere.
There are nuts everywhere. There's even one teaching this class. I'll tell you that much. All right, so history constantly draws us forward to the next great event, great civilization, right? And I think our country's part of that, right? I think we're just one of the great things that's happened so far, right? Everything that has happened sets the stage for what comes next, right? Just like Michael was saying, right? You learn from it. It's already happened before, right? Just one of those favorite things is that there's nothing new under the sun, right? You say that all the time, and I love it. Everything that happens, the journey is filled with ups and downs, obviously. Twists and turns that offer new panoramic views of the world, right? That's why I like it. It kind of brings things in perspective, right? Learning from history. Sometimes things happen that have a lasting effect for generations. That made me think of, like, what do you think are some things that have happened in history that we still feel today? Well, obviously Christianity, right? But like, what are some things that were invented in history that we still use today?
I'm going to start with a very important one, just the printing press. The fact that
Printing
books,
press, for sure.
The fact that books and literacy became like such a widespread thing when it wasn't before. It was very exclusive.
You're right, yeah. That's a big one. Anybody else? Well, something else that we use today that was invented in
We just celebrated one last week, America's independence.
America's independence. Still celebrated today. I thought of a big one too, along with his. The wheel. Right? The wheel. Of course, we have reinvented it in some ways, right? But, man, can you imagine still doing it Flintstone style, you know? That'd be crazy. Brian was there. He knows. Anybody else? How about just language in general, right? Still use language today. All right. So in this chapter, chapter 4, right, in impacts and intersections, we're going to be looking at Israel coming together as a nation. We're going to look at what's going on in China, right? Advancements in China, but also the story behind the first Olympics. This is all part of this chapter here. Okay. Come on now. All right, here. We will observe from the 3 points of historical perspectives here. We have sacred, secular, and redemptive, right, as we study this period in history. We will note shifts in world power, but we're not going to focus on the manner to understand like who ruled at the time, okay? But we will examine how God interacted in the midst of them all with the nation of Israel for his redemptive purpose. And God allowed all 3 points of view to intersect during this era, right? To me, starting with David, right? We're going to start with David first. Then eventually we're going to get to Solomon. Solomon building the temple. But then we're going to see a divide, right? We're going to see the nation split. And so we will see some powerful intersections of history that continue to affect our world today. It's going to be pretty cool. This is a short chapter, by the way. This one's pretty short. Chapter 5, though, that's going to take a while. All right, so reign of King David, right? He's king of Israel from around 1011 to 947. Oh my goodness, I'm like Robert up here. He got all the dates wrong last week with he's like, today is 274 years of independence. I'm like, no. 247. 1011 through 971 BC. Okay, 40 years. He was obviously an incredible guy, right? He was a great, inspiring leader. I think this is his biggest one here. He loved God and was chosen by him to lead his people, right? In 1 Samuel 13:14, it says that he's a man after God's own heart. Remember a while ago when I had that like lunchroom scene? It had like 8 or 10 different people from the Bible saying, if you had 10 minutes for lunch, who would you sit with and talk with? My dad said David, because he was a man after God's own heart. Right? He's a great warrior. Okay, he led Israel's armies. He defeated a giant by himself. Well, not by himself. Obviously, we knew God was with him, right? But he's the only one who stood up to him. Okay? He's a skilled musician. He's a gifted composer, right, of poetry and songs. And the world has never been the same since, right? The world has never been the same. You didn't know that. Some people think that he didn't even live, right? And that's crazy to me, right? Of course he lived. His life, humility, successes, failures, repentance and faith, right, have challenged all of us for, thousands of years, right? Millions of people have been challenged by David, right? He's a great example, So, he captured Jerusalem from the Jebusites and made it the capital of Israel. So that's 2 Samuel 5, 6 through 7. Because Kay always wants, where'd you find that, right? So, if I'm lying, then I'm dying, right? You know where I'm going. So what does it say there? 2 Samuel 5, 6 through 7. Yeah.
Now the king and his men went to Jerusalem against the Jebusites and the inhabitants of the land, and they said to David, "You shall not come in here, but the blind and the lame shall turn you away," thinking, "David cannot enter here." Nevertheless, the king captured the stronghold of Sion, that is the city of David.
There you go. Right? The proof. He called it the city of David, but only the part that he had originally conquered, right? But this is, we're calling Jerusalem the city of David. Now that's 2 Samuel 5, 7, and then in verse 9. Okay? So, nevertheless, David captured the fortress of Zion, which is the city of David. They go down to verse 9 here. David then took up residence in the fortress and called it the city of David. Right, there you go. So he expanded Israel's borders, making it strong and secure against neighboring powers. So here's his a map could show what his kingdom looked like, right? All the way from the what we would probably call around the Persian Gulf, right? This is the Gulf of Aqaba, all the way up to the Euphrates River. Right? Pretty extensive at the time. Come on now, there you go. So he secured economic viability by advancing south, conquering Edom and the Araba Desert, which, I want to go back. Right there, right? So Edom is that green part down on the bottom. Okay. That's the south part, okay. Which is rich in copper and iron. We are in the Iron Age now, right? If we're thinking secularly, right? This is the Iron Age. And access to natural resources enabled him to produce weaponry and maintain power over the Philistines, right? So let's go to 1 Chronicles 22, 1 through 3. 1 Chronicles 22, 1 through 3. This doesn't mention, making weapons to fight, but it does mention him using the resources from these areas. Okay? So 1 Chronicles 22, 1 through 3. Someone can read that, or it's on the board too, if you can read it.
Then David said, "The house of the Lord God is to be here, and also the altar of the burnt offering for Israel." So David gave orders to assemble for the foreigners residing in Israel, and from among them he appointed stone cutters to prepare dressed stone for the building of the house of God. He provided a large amount of iron to make the nails for the doors of the gateways and for the fittings, and more bronze than could be weighed. He also provided more cedar logs than could be counted for the Sidonians and the Tyrians, and brought them large numbers of them to David.
Right there, stop. That's good. Thank you. So he's obviously using all these resources, right? That's what that's for. By the way, Jesse, all of this was on one slide, but I separated it for you last night.
Thank
You're welcome. I was like, I better do this because it's pretty small on my screen. Jesse's not going to be able to see it. So access in the Araba region, which is down south, right, helped David, up north, advance north and establish Israel's northern borders, okay? He conquered the Aramean king Hadadezer, which is in modern-day Syria, okay, which is north of Israel, who was the thorn in the side of the Assyrians. And they're kind of northwest right now of Israel. Okay? So let's go to 1 Chronicles 18:3. This talks about that. 1 Chronicles 18:3. So we're talking, where's my laser at? This one? Oh, you guys can't see it. Anyways, it's all that orange part up there, up top. So it says, moreover, David defeated Hadadezer, king of Zobah, that's the orange part up there, in the vicinity of Hamath, when he went to set up his monument at the Euphrates River. And that border way up there on the orange part, that says Euphrates River. Okay, so this here shows the extent of his kingdom. Okay. So at this time in history, a combination of international political factors brought Israel some respite from conflict with both Israel and Assyria, the two great powers in the Near East. As the nation of Israel was consolidated under King David, Egypt was preoccupied by a civil war between Upper Egypt, which is actually in the south, right? And Lower Egypt, which is in the north. Because you know the Nile River flows north and south, right? Lower Egypt was ruled by the pharaohs, which is more by the sea, right, by the delta. And the Upper Egypt down south was ruled by the high priest of Amun, who hired Libyan mercenaries to support their rule. Assyria, as noted earlier, was being kept at bay by the Aramaeans, who they're a wandering group of nomads that eventually settled down in the region of north of Israel, and Damascus was their capital. Okay, so we're talking about modern-day Syria. That's what we're talking about here. Okay, so again, I also split this one up for you. Does it, Jesse? It's because I love you.
I appreciate that.
You're welcome. No, it is. She didn't say it back to me. I'm just kidding. I know you do. I know you do. So, with major powers of the Near East neutralized, David was able to unify Israel and conquer some of the smaller nations surrounding the area. I think it's kind of like, I think someone was with him at this time too, don't you think? Right. He just happened to have all these other things going on at the same time while he was trying to make Israel one nation. Right? Some big guy had his hands at play with it, right? Pretty cool. So he desired to build a temple for the Lord to replace the aging tabernacle. Well, that's a picture of what his tabernacle could have looked like, obviously. Right? There wasn't flash photography back then. However, God told David that that's not part of his plan. Right? You're not meant to build a temple. You're meant for something, to me, better. Right? And that's the extent of his kingdom again up there. So instead, he's going to build David's house to rule Israel forever. Right? And we mentioned this last week too. 2 Samuel 7, looking at verse 16, your house and your kingdom will endure forever before me. Your throne will be established forever. And we know exactly who that's talking about, right? This is Jesus. Okay? Meaning the Messiah would come through the house of David. And that's Matthew 1:1, Romans 1:3, 2 Timothy 2:8, right? Those are all those that mention that. So this promise is linked through secular history, sacred history, and redemptive history all at once. That all comes together. Okay? I think I have my question next. Yep, so why is King David so revered among both Jews and Christians? Jesse, her hand was raised.
I think it was a great example of what not to do, especially when it comes to lusting after another man's wife.
Bathsheba.
And he also was great inspiration of repentance. And his faith was, even though he did bad, he never left
he was crushed, right? He's like, what have I done? He was crushed. Bill, go ahead.
Jesus came through his lineage.
Yeah. Yeah. Jesus came through David, right?
What did he say?
He said that Jesus came through his lineage, right? Anybody else want to add anything there?
Yeah, I think David's humility counted a lot. He was always willing to say, yes, God, I did that. Whereas we might say, Ron did, I didn't.
Yeah, Ron. It's always Ron. Yeah, blame Ron. Yeah. I agree, right? Like, how hard is it for us to say that I'm wrong, right? Very, very hard, right? And you can't tell God, no, I didn't do that. He's yeah, you did. I was there, right? Right, Adam and Eve? I was there. I knew what you did. Yes?
Yeah, well, David, he's a great example of each individual here. No one's perfect. We go along and stumble so many times, and David did a great job of showing us times. But each time, he rose back up, put his faith back into God, which he always had. But at that time, he was, the poor world was pulling him apart like it does us. So we see him, and he was a man after God's own heart all through his life. And though he fell all the time, he always sought God for guidance and help. And that's the same thing, the example he set for us to do. Because we do the same thing.
I think he's probably one of the best examples of being human, right? Yeah. Yes, Austin.
I think as a people, the Jews revere King David particularly because he was used as an instrument by God to actually bring a unifying physical peace to the land, and that's what they were looking for. And that's what they were looking for in Jesus, and it didn't really happen. But with David, it really happened.
Yeah, that's true too, yeah.
So I think that's why he could be particularly reviewed.
By the Jews or by both?
By the Jews.
By the Jews, yeah.
Specifically.
Yeah, well, yeah, because they don't, yeah, we know what they believe. All right, so, we're good. We're going to start looking at China now, okay? So, China, a brief look at China here. There are some important things going on here in China that are being made that are greatly affect the history of the nation, okay? Matters that keep it from having direct impact with sacred history, okay? So they're pretty isolated at this time, and we're going to get into that here. So we're talking about the green little circle. If you can tell, that's Israel. That's where we just left. The big orange part is at least modern-day borders of China. It didn't look like that back then. All right, so during King David's reign, right, this is 1011 through 971 BC, right? The Zhao dynasty usurped the throne from the Shang dynasty, becoming the longest reigning dynasty in the country's history. Okay? So the yellow on there is the Zhao dynasty, and there it says, and then the orange is the Shang dynasty. Okay? They reigned, it said the Shang dynasty was 1500 through 1027 BC, and Zhao was 1027 through 256 BC. That's what it says. So, Susan Weisbauer stated in her book that's titled The History of the Ancient World, it says that there were yet no barbarians invading civilized people, no struggle between one nation and another. The greatest struggle was between the king's virtue and his wickedness. The threat to his throne came first from his own nature. So, what does it mean? That's one of Joel's favorite questions. What does it mean? Right? Remember that they were doing things that were keeping them out of sacred history, right? And then we can look back over what it says here. I'll read it one more time, right? It says, there were as yet no barbarians invading civilized people. This is China, right? China's area. There were as yet no barbarians invading civilized people, no struggle between one nation and another. The great struggle was between a king's virtue and his wickedness. The threat to his throne came first from his own nature. So what does that mean?
Corruption and lavishness is the thing that's going to bring it
Yeah. So if it's whatever's gonna bring down this nation is, what's the king doing, right? Is this saying that do they have any outside interactions at this time?
Where is this relation to the Great Wall, the building of it?
I gotta look that up, but I think it's pretty close to this time when they're
So they were
close to
really
it.
trying to isolate themselves, so all their problems come from within,
Yeah.
in leadership.
Well, if you know, so does anyone know? Go.
It was the Zhang dynasty that most of it was built, I
The,
think. Or at least that it got started.
okay, yeah, maybe. Sure, please. Also, if you guys know anything about the geography of East Asia, right? On the west of China's borders now are the Himalayan mountains, right? Some of the largest in the world. Even in the north, there's a desert, okay? And then to the east of them is the Pacific Ocean. And in the south is a bunch of jungle. So they have a lot of these geographic features that are pretty tough to navigate through, right? But yeah, so it says, no one's coming in to invade them, right? There's no struggle, there's not really any other nations really around them, right? So again, the only way that's going to bring them down, their only struggles are going to be, what's the king doing? Okay, because they're pretty isolated, physically, right? All right, did you find it? When was the Great Wall started? 220 BC. So we're talking about, I think it's after these two, but still, I mean, we're getting close. Right? So this means that China grew and developed without much contact from outside. Okay, not much contact there. They focused on inward moral development rather than world domination, as characterized by the king. Okay? Right, what's the king doing? Just like Austin was saying. If he had become corrupted and perverted, his kingdom could be usurped by a more virtuous king. Inward focus allowed it to develop a more isolated political culture. So, let's go back at the Shang dynasty, right? Which started roughly around 1766 BC. Okay, they're called the Yellow Rivers civilization because its cities were built along the Yellow River, right? Or I think it's called the Yangtze River, I think, in the eastern parts of the Yellow River. So this is the Bronze Age came to life during this dynasty. Right? There's a picture down there with all those green-looking things. That's bronze. I think we all know that over time, due to exposure, bronze turns more of a green color, right? Copper turns more to a green color. Okay. So what did they bring here? So this is when the Chinese alphabet was first being developed. Not the one that they use today, but it helped develop it, right? It came to what they were using today. Here's the alphabet. It was actually more like, so it says that each character stood for an idea rather than had a sound to it. I thought that was pretty interesting here. There's no connection between the spoken language and the written language. So what that means is you could read it without being able to speak it, and vice versa, right? You can speak it without being able to read it. Okay? It says that just to be barely literate in this culture, you had to know over 1,000 characters. That's barely literate. Okay? If you're going to be a scholar, you had to know around 10,000 characters. Do we even know 10,000 words? I don't know. So, you know, a nobleman's children would learn to write this, right? They're going to have to be like the scholars. Okay? I just thought that was really interesting. And you can see there's a They look like, kind of like hieroglyphics, kind of. There's a bunch of pictures. Okay? All right, so advancements in the writing brought a religious movement. Because just like Michael said, right, the printing press, right, that's what really helped spread the word much faster, right? So they used it to seek the divine spirits to find answers to life's questions. A long time ago, I mentioned that this was, I think, after Babel, after the Tower of Babel. You know, people scattered throughout the world, and they all have something in common, right? They're all trying to find this higher power, right? Even China's doing this too back then, right? They're trying. They know something's bigger than them. They just don't know what it is. They don't know God, I guess, at least in great depth. So what they would do is they would engrave characters on oracle bones, sometimes on family members' bones. And it was believed to be, they believed to be in heaven, guiding those still on earth. So something like that. They have their characters, and they would engrave them on their bones. Okay. Priests applied heat to dry bones or turtle shells until the surface cracked. This was like the palm reading, right? So there's like, oh, this crack means this, and this crack, oh, it did this, is this wide, is this thin, right? That's what they would do. So obviously this is some kind of divine message, I mean, obviously, right? At least to them it was. Okay? So the reign of Wu Yi, he reigned for 77 years. Okay? Brought about the demise of the Shang dynasty. He was a corrupted king whose main offense to the people was showing disrespect to the gods. He cast lots, and if certain combinations regarded it as favorable omens turned up in his favor, he mocked the gods as lousy gamblers. Well, they're obviously wrong, right? That's what he's saying. They're obviously wrong. And he's regarded as a serious moral failure in violation of the king's responsibility. Okay? I'm going to mention this picture here in just one second. Okay? He's like, you see him holding a bow and arrow looking up, right? So as oracle bone rituals became more part of Chinese life, the king's role as the head of the courts increased. United the government and courts because wisdom sought from the courts was through the use of communicating with the divine. Oh, after this slide, and then we're done. This is why people vehemently disliked Wu Yi, okay? Because he's supposed to be head of the court, and they don't see him as a good fit, okay? And apparently, the gods shared their dislike because he was killed by a lightning strike while hunting. So that picture where he was holding the bow and arrow, right? Come on, go back. Right there? He's like mocking him. And then struck by lightning. So he was succeeded by his son and then grandson, who were even worse than he was, right? They helped his dynasty go into the toilet. And we'll talk about that next week. All right. Thanks for listening to this event.
That's